It was a bright Saturday morning when Sarah and Dan woke up to the sound of an old truck rumbling outside their suburban home. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, where the most exciting thing that happened was the occasional visit from the ice cream truck. But today was different. As they peeked out their window, they saw a rusty old truck in their driveway. A burly man with a scruffy beard, wearing a worn-out cap, was unloading something large and cylindrical into their backyard. Dan, still in his pajamas, rushed outside to see what was going on. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Dan called out, squinting at the large object now sitting in their yard. The man grunted, wiped his forehead, and replied, "Just delivering this LPG tank, like the order said." Dan was puzzled. "We didn't order any LPG tank." The delivery man scratched his head. "Well, this is the address I was given. If you don't want it, you'll have to call the company to sort it out. My job's done here." With that, he hopped back into his truck and drove off, leaving Dan standing in the yard with a giant LPG tank. Sarah joined him outside, her hair still in curlers. "What is that?" she asked, pointing at the tank. "I have no idea," Dan replied, scratching his head. As the morning wore on, the mysterious tank became the talk of the neighborhood. Their nosy neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, was the first to notice it. She waddled over, holding her little dog, Pookie, under one arm. Well, what do we have here?" she said, peering at the tank through her thick glasses. "Are you planning to start a gas station in your backyard?" Sarah chuckled nervously. "No, we don't even know why it's here." Word spread quickly, and soon more neighbors came by to gawk at the enormous tank. Mr. Thompson from next door suggested it might be a secret government experiment, while Mrs. Murphy insisted it was clearly a giant propane grill for the world's biggest barbecue. Dan rolled his eyes at the wild theories, but had to admit he was just as clueless. He decided to call the gas company to figure out where the tank came from and, more importantly, how to get rid of it. After waiting on hold for what felt like an eternity, Dan finally got through to a customer service representative at the gas company. "Hi, this is Dan Miller. We received an LPG tank this morning, but we didn't order it." The woman on the other end of the line sounded cheerful but confused. "Let me check our records, Mr. Miller." "Oh, it appears that there was a mix-up. The tank was supposed to be delivered to the Miller residence on Oak Street, but it ended up at your place on Oak Avenue instead." Dan sighed with relief. "Great. So you'll come and pick it up?" There was a brief pause. "Well, actually, Mr. Miller, that might take a while. Our trucks are all booked up for the next 2 weeks." Dan's jaw dropped. "So you're telling me we have to keep this giant tank in our backyard for 2 weeks? I'm afraid so. But don't worry, it's completely safe. Just think of it as a temporary lawn ornament," the woman added with a laugh. Dan wasn't amused. He hung up the phone and turned to Sarah, who had been eavesdropping. "Looks like we're stuck with it for a while." Over the next few days, the LPG tank became an unexpected guest in Sarah and Dan's life. At first, they were annoyed by its presence, but soon, they found themselves making the best of the situation. Sarah, ever the creative one, decided to decorate the tank. She covered it with colorful lights and even added a few flower pots around its base. "If it's going to be here, it might as well look nice," she said with a grin. Dan, on the other hand, had a different idea. "You know, Sarah, this could be the perfect opportunity to prank the neighbors." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Prank them how?" Dan's eyes twinkled mischievously. "We tell them it's not just an LPG tank. We say it's a rocket engine." Sarah burst out laughing. "A rocket engine? That's ridiculous." "Exactly."
Dan replied.
"But just think of the look on their faces." So, they went with the plan. The next time Mrs. Jenkins came by, Dan casually mentioned that the tank was actually part of a top-secret project he was working on for NASA. "You're building a rocket in your backyard?" she gasped. Dan nodded seriously. "But you can't tell anyone. It's highly classified." Mrs. Jenkins' eyes widened with excitement as she scurried off, Pookie barking excitedly in her arms. By the end of the day, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with rumors about Dan's supposed rocket project. As the rumor mill churned, the story of Dan's rocket project grew more outlandish. Some neighbors claimed they had seen strange lights coming from the tank at night, while others swore they heard it humming like an engine ready to launch. Mr. Thompson, who had initially suggested the government experiment theory, now believed that Dan was actually an undercover agent working on a mission to Mars. Mrs. Murphy, on the other hand, insisted it was an alien spacecraft disguised as a gas tank. The neighborhood became so obsessed with the tank that people started gathering outside Sarah and Dan's house, hoping to catch a glimpse of the rocket in action. Sarah and Dan could hardly keep a straight face as they watched the chaos unfold. Every time someone asked about the tank, Dan would come up with a new, more ridiculous explanation. He told one neighbor that the tank was filled with a special fuel made from moon rocks, and another that it was designed to teleport them to a secret base on the dark side of the moon. The day finally came when the gas company called to arrange the pickup of the LPG tank. Dan felt a pang of disappointment. After all, the tank had become a source of endless entertainment. When the truck arrived to take the tank away, the neighbors gathered to watch, still believing that they were witnessing the removal of a top-secret government device. As the tank was loaded onto the truck, Mrs. Jenkins rushed over to Dan, breathless with excitement. "So, Dan, where's the rocket going? Are they launching it today?" Dan couldn't hold it in any longer. He burst out laughing, and Sarah joined in. "Mrs. Jenkins, I have to confess," Dan said between laughs. "It's not a rocket. It's just an ordinary LPG tank that got delivered by mistake." The crowd fell silent, processing the revelation. Then, one by one, the neighbors began to chuckle, realizing how carried away they had all gotten. Mr. Thompson shook his head, grinning. "You really had us going there, Dan." Mrs. Murphy laughed and patted Dan on the back. "Well played, young man. Well played." As the truck drove away with the tank, the neighborhood returned to its usual calm. But the adventure with the mysterious LPG tank left everyone with a story they would never forget. Sarah and Dan became the talk of the town, not just for the tank, but for their clever prank that brought the neighborhood together in laughter and fun. And while the tank was gone, the memories of the wild rumors and wild imaginations remained, reminding everyone that sometimes a little mystery and a lot of humor can make life a lot more enjoyable. Hope you enjoyed this funny story. Don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Your participation is essential so that we can continue to bring you more incredible stories. Share it with your friends to help our channel grow. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.